Hey, what's up guys? Joker here. Today is a rather sad day for me because it has become apparent that building a PC in the year 2018 is going to be practical for that many people out there. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about the enthusiasts, although they're definitely feeling the sting of this as well. But the way that I look at it is that the enthusiasts that are going to go out and spend, $2,000 or $1,500 plus, really, they were going to spend that much anyway, and it's probably not going to stop them from building a PC. But the people that I feel are going to be hurt most by the current rise in prices on RAM as well as graphics cards are going to be the first-time builders or the people on a budget of below $1,000, where the advice that I would have given a year ago to build your own system, not only because of the experience and getting to learn something, but also because it would have been cheaper than going out and buying a pre-built system in most instances, has gone completely out the window, where now it's done a flip-flop and you can actually buy pre-built systems cheaper than you could if you were to actually build it yourself, which just really sucks for me, not only as a fan of building PCs and someone that enjoys teaching people how to build PCs, but also from a business standpoint, as it just is hard to really make a PC build guide anymore for anyone that is wanting to get into system building, because there's just so much controversy over it. People are just saying, oh, well, you can't get it for those prices. It's the MSRP is just not realistic, and you're going to spend like $1,500 building a PC that just a few months ago should have cost you $900 or $1,000. So it's just a really awful time right now for PC gaming and PC builders in general, where you can go out and get these pre-built systems for cheaper than it would be if you were to actually build it yourself. I wanted to start this investigation by going over on a couple websites like Amazon and Newegg, and I found what I thought was the most reasonable pre-built system over on Amazon. It comes from iBuyPower. This system right here has got an Intel i7 7700, so it's a non-K variant, which means it's not overclockable. It's using a B250 motherboard, and it's got a GTX 1070 8GB card along with 8GB of DDR4 RAM. On top of that, it's also got a 120GB SSD and a 1TB mechanical hard drive. So a very strong system, not a low-end system by any means, but also not like the uber high-end, but chances are you wouldn't have trouble running pretty much any game in 2018 with a system like this at probably high and ultra settings in the vast majority of cases. So I wanted to look at this in terms of the pricing, based on the fact that this system right now on Amazon is $1,239.99 American cents. So what would it cost you to actually build this system yourself? I initially started out by going on Amazon, Newegg, and other sites to try to see if I could part out everything myself, but I ended up having to go through a PC part picker. Just really quickly, looking over on Newegg, just look at these RAM prices that are just out of hand right now. Looking at a single DIMM of 8GB DDR4 memory from Crucial as well as Corsair, you could see that these are $96 and $97 respectively, which is way more than what this RAM should actually cost. To get it around $90, you actually have to get a bare DIMM with no heat spreader from Crucial, and that's the cheapest one I was able to find for a single 8GB. Oh, no, we got one down here for $88, sorry. A real steal at 10% off. No, that RAM stick should probably cost you around $50, $60 at most for 8GB of DDR4 memory. Looking at the 16GB kits, which a lot of people would advise for a system builder to use, you're looking at $200 and upward, which just makes it almost impossible to get a 16GB kit right now if you are on a budget. You're more than likely going to end up getting an 8GB DIMM and then adding another one down the road if you really feel that you need it. And graphics cards are probably going to make up the biggest chunk, or they are going to make up the biggest chunk of your budget. And that problem is no longer limited to just AMD graphics cards because of miners. We know that miners want to get their AMD graphics cards for the mining, the compute performance that they can get out of them, but NVIDIA has now joined the ranks of the impossible to acquire graphics card list, and on all of them really, 1060, 1070, 1080, 1080 Ti, doesn't really matter. Anywhere in that spectrum, you are going to be spending well over what the market value should realistically be on those graphics cards. Let's take a look at the GTX 1070, which is the one in this system. Look at these prices for the ones that are actually in stock. You are looking at $900 or $1,000 for a GTX 1070. That is absolutely obscene. GTX 1070 Ti Founders Edition card, $1,249. Are you kidding me right now? The realistic prices of what these should be are down here. The MSRPs are $470, $490. Like, okay, that's around the ballpark of what these aftermarket cards should cost, but we're looking at $900 or $1,000. And I really hate the fact that this is happening, because just back on January 4th, I did that video where people were saying the prices were going to come up by about $5 to $20. Like, $5 to $20? Are you kidding me right now? That is not $5 to $20. These cards are fucking double what they should be. These graphics card manufacturers need to sort this out and just get over this already and start producing more cards quicker for gamers and miners at the same time, or make mining specific cards or something, or introduce a driver up. If they really do care about gamers, if they really honestly care about gamers, they would push out like a driver update that pretty much just butchers mining performance or something. I don't know. I'm trying to think outside the box right now, because it's so infuriating to see this and seeing people have to spend this much money to get a graphics card, which should realistically cost around $400. The GTX 1060. Let's look at this for a laugh, shall we? The GTX 1060 3GB card, $400. Over here, the 6GB card, $500. Absolutely insane. That is not a $5 to $20 price hike like some of the analysts had predicted. This is way more than what these cards should cost. That 6GB card, that should be around $250 to $300. And the prices, they just really suck. So let's go back to that iBuy power system I mentioned before. As I said, i7 1700, GTX 1070. I went through on PC Part Picker to see how much we could actually build this system for today if we wanted to go out and buy all the components at the best price that we could possibly get. So let's start off with the i7 7700. That's a non-overclockable variant. The best deal we could find was on Outlet PC for $297.41. So perfectly fine. That's really what that part should cost. The CPU cooler, I have not added on an additional CPU cooler, because looking at the build, we could see on here that they are just using a stock Intel cooler, so that is what we went with. The motherboard, they don't list the exact make and model, but I found one that was a decent deal for $77. It is a B250 motherboard, because they do mention that it is a B250 variant, which is perfectly fine considering the fact that this is a non-overclockable i7 CPU. So I went with an MSI B250 PC Mate, which is $77 after a $20 mail-in rebate. For the RAM, I went with 8GB of DDR4 at 3000 MHz. That's two 4GB DIMMs. I was able to tell that it was ADATA by looking at the image on here. I can tell that's ADATA XPG RAM very likely. So that is what we went here. $114 for two 4GB sticks. You could get those cheaper, but I was trying to keep things as close as possible to what they actually had in this system. The SSD, $50 for 120 gig, not a problem with that. Seagate Barracuda 1TB, 7200 RPM drive, that was $51.40. They did mention on there that they were using a 7200 RPM mechanical drive, but they didn't mention the brand on that or the SSD. So I went with what I could find, what I thought was a good deal and what I would use if I was actually building a system. Now, the big chunk of this is really going to come from the graphics card. The GTX 1070 over on Outlet PC, you can get for the rock bottom price of $799.89 American cents. Wow. What a deal. What a tech deal, you might even say. For the chassis, we found the NZXT S340 Black Edition. It's an ATX mid-tower chassis. Not sure exactly what case they're using from iBuy Power, but the S340 is pretty darn close to it, and it's also a very good case as well. $70 with a $20 mail-in rebate brings that down to $50. They didn't mention the exact power supply or the wattage, but someone did answer one of the questions over on Amazon for what the PSU was, so I ended up going with a Corsair CXM 550 watt 80 plus bronze rated power supply for $55. So what is the final cost of our build, trying to get something as close as possible to what iBuy Power is offering for, once again, for $1,239. Final cost is, drumroll please, $1,494.64. That is absolutely insane for a budget PC with a GTX 1070. If you knocked off $400, this build should be around $1,100. And then if the RAM were to come down to a realistic price for what it should be, we're looking at around $1,050. which is what these parts should probably cost in the market. Let's say a year ago, you could have got this build probably for around $1,000 to $1,100, which would have been cheaper than the iBuyPower system. Although for a first-time, PC user that doesn't want to build a system, having like a $140 premium is not really that much of a price hike over buying the components themselves. But now you're looking at about a $250 premium if you go out and buy the parts yourself. So this just really sucks, honestly, at the end of the day, that this is the current state of the PC market that we are living in. I do look forward to our discussion down in the comments below as always. Let me know your thoughts on this. If you are a system builder, if you've been waiting to build a system, especially if you're new to PC gaming and you are trying...
Hello and welcome to another edition of BuzzFeed Unsolved Postmortem, a show where we answer your most pressing questions about the most recent episode of BuzzFeed Unsolved, which was Rolling Hills Asylum. All the questions we're answering today came from you guys via our BuzzFeed Unsolved Facebook page and our BuzzFeed Unsolved Instagram page. As you can see, he's back.
Big thanks to Curly for filling in. Glad to be back.
Yeah, that makes one of us.
I mean, we're friends, Ryan. You don't have to pretend like you hate me.
I wish I was pretending. This comes from Facebook. Devin Wilson. Will the static dog feature in more episodes? It's pretty compelling evidence. Also, he needs a name. Maybe Buzz the dog that proves Shane wrong about ghosts. Is that the full name?
That doesn't roll off the tongue.
We set up a static camp to watch the dog. We don't use the dog again because that was something that was offered by the location, and frankly, even if we did, it wouldn't convince this guy.
And it's baloney, it's pseudoscience.
Oh, okay.
You know?
The dog uses an electromagnetic field around it. I think I said static electricity around it in the episode. There's an electric field around the dog, and then when you manipulate that field and you enter it,
Grahamtown, here's from Ayo Izzy. There was probably a bug on that dog. That place seemed like it would have some bugs. Also, are we all sure it wasn't just a psychopath trespasser murdering a rat and leaving it as a present for whomever came by next? Because my cat used to do that all the time. Hashtag Shania, hashtag Grammy for the hot dog. I guess it could be a bug. That didn't even occur to me. That's very, very possible, right?
well,
very possible.
It would have to be
A bug.
It would have to be a bug that was sitting there for a long time, over and over again, just hopping up and down. Because
Or a fly.
this doesn't come off in the video, but that disturbance was happening randomly for about 20 minutes. So a bug just...
Did you know a baby humpback whale can drink up to 130 gallons of milk each day?
What's up, guys? JS2Cents here, and it's been a year. What's up, guys? JS2Cents here, and it's been years since I've done a how to build a computer guide. I don't know, maybe I've gotten a little bit too complacent and I forget that there are new PC builders every single day. What's up, guys? JS2Cents here, and it's been years since I've done a how to build a computer guide. I don't know, maybe I've gotten a little bit too complacent and I forget that there are new PC builders every single day. So today I'm talking to the beginner who's already chosen their parts and they're sitting there scratching their head going, how the heck do I put this all together? Now also a huge thank you to ASUS for sponsoring today's video, as well as sending out some really cool stuff for us to include in this how-to guide. I'm not gonna call it a build guide because I'm not telling you what parts to use. This isn't, part lists are always changing. So I want something that's gonna last for a while, will be applicable for a long time. With Ryzen being out, this is the perfect time to do it. Now they sent over their ROG motherboard here. This is the Crosshair 6 Hero from obviously ASUS, a Republic of Gamers motherboard. We've got an AMD Ryzen 1700X, a pretty decent CPU that doesn't break the bank but still gives you some pretty good overclock ability. We've got the ROG Strix GTX 1070. It's an NVIDIA graphics card, of course. Pretty good sweet spot GPU again, in my opinion. And we've got a couple of peripherals here to take a look at. We've got the Gladius 2 mouse, the successor to their popular Gladius mouse we took a look at a while back, and their new ROG Claymore. It's an RGB mechanical gaming keyboard. So with that said, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna build it. I'm gonna build this. I'm gonna tell you what I'm doing as I do it, and hopefully I won't leave out anything really important. But I think we can do this. I think I can build this. Let's see. When it comes to building a basic PC, I like to have pretty basic tool set. I use a multi-bit right here, which has got different size Phillips and flathead screwdrivers, zip ties to keep our cables nice and tidy, and some side cutters for cutting our zip ties. Now for this build today, we're going to also need a USB thumb drive because we are going to be updating the BIOS on our Ryzen motherboard, which is something I recommend. If you're building a Ryzen CPU-based computer, then definitely get the latest BIOS from your motherboard manufacturer and include that as part of your installation. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go ahead and bench test this. We want to make sure all of the components work before we get them inside the computer, because that's the worst time to find out something is not working right. So to do that, obviously we need our motherboard right here. We need our power supply. We need our CPU, graphics card, our cooler, and in this case I'm using the Celsius S36 from Fractal Design, just launched. And we need a monitor, of course, to be able to see if we're actually posting. Now, AMD-based CPUs have the pins located on the CPU itself, whereas Intel-based systems have the pins located on the motherboard. So you're going to definitely want to handle the CPU with care, but you want to take note that on the corner of the CPU is a gold triangle. Now, that gold triangle is going to align with a triangle that's located on the socket itself. So open up the retention arm, align the gold triangle on the CPU with the triangle on the socket, and push down the arm. Now for our memory, you're going to open up the retention tabs here on the motherboard for your RAM sticks. Now as you can see, we've got 4 RAM slots, but we only have 2 sticks of RAM. So we're only using 2 of the slots on here. Now if you're using a different motherboard, you want to consult your manual to determine which slots are appropriate for how many DIMMs you're using. Now in this case, we're going to use both of the gray slots. You're going to align the slot on the DIMM with the slot on the motherboard, slide it into place, and you're going to push down firmly until you hear a click. And you're going to do that for both of your RAM sticks. So I decide to do things a little bit difficult sometimes, and because I'm just such a stickler for water cooling, I'm using an all-in-one water cooling loop. Now if you were using an air cooler, at this point you would install your air cooler on the motherboard and you would just leave it. You can install it in the case with your cooler already installed, but I can't do that with an all-in-one water cooling loop, at least not as easy. So we're going to be doing a temporary installation of the pump to the motherboard. For the sake of just doing a post, I don't actually have to install the fans on the radiator. There's enough passive cooling on this to allow me to turn on the system and make sure that it's all working without any threat of overheating the system. So we're going to go ahead and start by removing the screws that are on the AM4 bracket right here. And this particular cooler will be reusing the back plate that is on this. So with the amount of different types of coolers there are in the market, I can't possibly include all of those in this video. So it's very important that you consult the manual for whatever cooler you are using. But the nice thing about the Celsius is it does include brackets for Ryzen right out of the box. So that's a plus. So we're going to start by installing this guy right into place, just like so. And we're going to do that for all 4 posts. These are the standoffs that allow our pump to have something to screw down to. But as you can see, like I said, here's our 4 posts, and they retain the factory backplate. So you want to apply about a pea-sized drop of thermal paste right in the middle of the CPU. My pea's a little fatter than most. And we also need to remove the bracket that comes with the cooler that's pre-installed for Intel. We're going to take the AMD bracket, pre-apply it to the pump, and then we are going to take our pump and put it into place. Once it's in place, just take your 4 thumb screws, install them using the alternating corner method, very similar to putting a wheel on a car, but don't tighten anything down just yet. We want all 4 applied to where there's just a little bit of resistance. And once that's done, we can take our screwdriver and just give them one little ugga-dugga, if you will. So it's just slightly snug. You don't want to over tighten this. The threads won't let it go any farther than it needs to. Take our pump wire and plug it into the pump header or the CPU header on the motherboard. This one actually has an AIO pump header, so we're going to be plugging it into there. Next, we're going to take our super sexy GTX 1070 Strix graphics card. We're going to make sure the PCI Express retention clip is open. Usually they come closed. Push that open. And we are going to also make sure the motherboard is aligned on the edge of the box so that the retaining tabs on the bottom of the card can hang off of the edge. Align it with the socket, and then push down until you hear a satisfying click. Or in this case, I have to push it up. There we go. So now it's fully in place. It's going to be a little bit wobbly, so you want to be careful with it because we don't have anything supporting it on this side, but we want to make sure that it boots up and that everything is good. Now, depending on which power supply you're using with your build, you may or may not have modular cables. Now, the G3, which I'm using here from EVGA, does indeed have a full modular cable set. So I had to locate the 24 pin for the motherboard, the EPS power for the CPU, one PCI Express power for the GPU. This card only has one 8-pin power slot, so we only need one cable. And then we need the power cable to plug the PSU into power. Most modular power supplies are going to have the cables labeled. So you can see we have an MB here, which stands for motherboard, and those are going to plug into the ports on the back of the power supply that are labeled the same. So we're going to do that for all of our cables, including our CPU, PCI Express, and our, well, that's it in this case. We only have those three things with power right now. Now I like to hang on to all the twist ties that come off of the cable sets because at the end of the day, they're very useful for cable management, especially if you don't have enough zip ties or any zip ties at all. So take your 24-pin cable, give it a little bit of a bend, that way it's not putting too much stress on the socket, and you're going to align this little retention clip with the retention tab on the 24-pin on the motherboard. It's only going to fit one way because it is keyed. It's got all these different shapes. You can see they're squares and different hexagons or whatever the shape is. They're only going to fit one way, so once you get it lined up, it might take a little bit of force, especially when it's new, but go until you hear a click, and then it's in place. Next, we're going to take our CPU EPS power. And some motherboards only require a 4-pin, some require an 8-pin, so that's why this is split. Just push them together. Same thing, take those retention tabs, line them up right here with the notch, and push those into place. Finally, take your PCI Express power cable. You notice it's got a little pigtail here. Some graphics cards only need a 6-pin, some need an 8-pin, so it's kind of a universal, if you will. So in this case, we're going to push them together, making sure that the little retention tabs on there are firmly in place. These guys right here in the back. Line it up with the tab on our graphics card, and just like before, push it into place. If your power supply on the back has a power toggle, make sure it's in the off position. Plug in your power cable, and then plug this into a power source. Take your HDMI cable that's plugged into your monitor, plug it into your graphics card. Make sure your monitor is turned on. You got a light there, so we are turned on. All right, here comes the moment of truth, the part where you find out if all your parts work. We're going to start by flipping the power switch on the back of the PSU, and we're going to look for any lights on the motherboard. Now, we are getting a green light up here on the motherboard, so that's good. The motherboard's getting power. Now, not all motherboards have a start button like this one does. Most motherboards do have surface-mounted buttons now for reset and power, so I could push this start button to start it. But if yours doesn't, you could actually take a screwdriver and locate on the motherboard, or use the manual if it's not properly labeled, and find the pins that are labeled power button. And you could actually bridge those two together to turn on the system, like I just did. Now, normally I would just push the start button, but I wanted to show you that you could indeed do that. Now, the thing with AMD you want to keep in mind is the first post can sometimes take a while, like nerve-wrackingly finger-biting. I'm telling you, it can take a while sometimes. It really makes you wonder if things are working. So we're gonna wait. We're gonna wait. Oh, there we go. We got a blue light, there it is. Now what happened there is it actually went through the post cycle 3 times. What it does is it kind of like checks everything and then it reboots and then checks everything again. And the reason why I know that is over here, at least on this particular motherboard, we have this Q code readout, and that tells us what's happening with the post. We also have a series of LEDs right here that will go from green to yellow to white. And when it turns white, that means we have a good post. So that's why I was like, oh, we're good, because it actually turns into a white LED before the monitor ever came on. So the cool thing is, telling us we got a new CPU installed. Please enter setup to configure your system. We don't actually have a keyboard and mouse hooked up to this. So now that we confirm that everything is working, we're going to undo pretty much everything that we just did. Yeah, but that's okay. Trust me, taking it apart now is a lot easier than if we had everything in the computer and then figured out that something wasn't working right. Now there's some parts that you can actually leave plugged in here. So we're gonna go ahead and leave the memory plugged in. If you had an air cooler, you could leave that on here. But because I'm using an all-in-one cooler and I don't feel like trying to install this and finagle this all around to, you know, where it's not in my way, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the all-in-one water cooling loop as well. And we don't actually have to undo all of it, actually. We just need to undo the retaining tabs and remove the pump and the wire itself. We're gonna also have to clean off this thermal compound. So I'm just using a paper towel here. Most people use coffee filter, something that's non-fibrous, and some isopropyl alcohol. And we are going to go ahead and just sort of let that eat away at the thermal paste. We're gonna get as much of that off as possible. We wanna do the same thing to the pump surface. We don't want any thermal compound on there whatsoever. So, okay, case prep. This is the part where we need to get our case ready to receive our parts. Now there's no way I can tell you how to get your case ready because I don't know what parts you're using, I don't know what case you're using. But I'm using the Cooler Master Master Case Maker 6. This is one of their newer cases from the Maker line, and it is a full ATX supported case. That means it can support a full-size ATX motherboard, which is what we have right here. But this will also fit ITX and micro ATX. So as long as you know that your motherboard will fit in your case, then you're good to go. Now I also know I'm using a 360 millimeter radiator in this. That's not going to fit in the top of this case. So I'm gonna have to mount it to the front, which means I'm actually gonna have to remove this little cover here, take off the side panel, and show you the insides where we are going to get this case ready to receive the parts that I've obviously chosen. I'm going to be using one hard drive here for demonstration purposes. This is actually a Western Digital Red. It's a NAS drive, not necessarily a desktop drive, but it will work for today. And I'm using a Patriot Ignite 960 gigabyte SSD. So I know that this can actually mount right here if I want it to on the, call it the floorboard of the case, or I can actually move these brackets to the back of the motherboard tray if I want to. I also know that I only need to support one hard drive, so I don't need 3 here, 2 there. So I'm going to use the manual to determine how I can outfit this to fit my hard drive, my SSD, as well as my 360 millimeter radiator. So after looking at the manual and looking at the parts that I have that need to install, this is what I came up with, and we'll start at the bottom here. I moved the hard drive cage back 1 slot. Now it can go back 2 slots if we want it to, but I had to make some room here for the 360 rad, which I will be front mounting. Now that's not going to cause us a problem with overheating components inside the system. In fact, I did a video on that you guys can go and check out on how much the front mounted radiator actually affects the rest of the system. But we've got so much airflow in this case, it's not going to be a problem. The reason why I didn't mount it to the top is, as you can see here, we only can fit either 2 140s or 2 120s. We couldn't fit a 360. So what I did was I took the fans from the front of the case and moved them to the top. Since this case didn't come with any exhaust fans on the top, it only had one on the back. So we put those up here as an exhaust. We also have a 140 exhaust right here in the back. So now we can fit our 360 in the front also by installing the bracket that comes with this so that we could actually mount a 360 up front. Also too, instead of putting the SSD right here on show, it shows right there, which would be kind of neat, but it would split up our wiring. So I just installed it right here above our hard drive. That way our SATA power and our SATA cables go the same route to keep things nice and tidy. Could have also mounted it on the back of the motherboard tray, but at least having it right there puts it in the path of airflow, so if you're doing a lot of read-writes to your SSD, it keeps the temperature, and same thing with your hard drive, fairly low. The other thing I did was I installed our motherboard standoffs based on an ATX layout, because again, it is an ATX motherboard. So the next thing we need to do here is we need to get our motherboard installed, but before we go just throwing it in there, you need to take out your I/O shield. That's the piece of metal that goes in the back of the case that sort of acts as a shroud for all of your USB plugs and other things that go onto the motherboard. So here it is right here. We'll get this guy out of the way. And usually these get installed with the circles at the bottom. This is all of your audio. You can see right here by looking at the back of the motherboard, it's gonna go just like this. So you're gonna snap this guy right into the back of your case right here. Next, you wanna lay your case flat on its back. You wanna make sure that any cables are out of the way, just like this fan cable here. We'll just kind of move that guy up and out of there because we don't want to pinch that between the floor of the case and the motherboard. That can cause a short. Not to mention we need that cable, so we need some slack. So everything's out of the way. We're just going to take our motherboard. We're going to line up the audio jacks with the holes in the I/O shield in the back. And we are going to gently push it into place. Two of the standoffs in this case have nubs on them, which will hold the motherboard in place so that we can get them all screwed down. So you're going to screw in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 screws in this motherboard. What I like to do once I have the motherboard in is connect the front panel connectors. You know, that's for your front side USB, your power button, power switch, your hard drive, blinking light, all that stuff. And I like to do it now because if we just get it out of the way now, we don't have a graphics card in here and all kinds of stuff in our way, it's a lot easier. So I'm going to start by pushing the USB 3 right through the bottom grommet right here because we have more clearance this way. Fortunately, this case gives us a lot of options for routing things, much neater options. So there's our front side USB 3.0. And right here, these pins on the very bottom right corner, that's where you would plug in all of these little guys right there. Now this can get pretty annoying trying to wrangle up all these little wires and try and, you know, if you've got fat fingers like I do, to try and get them all in there. And so fortunately, ASUS includes this guy right here, and it's black and not white like some of them are, which really will stand out, and in a black theme, this is perfect. This is nothing more than a header that you plug all those pieces into here. It's a lot easier to work on outside of the case, and then you plug that in on the motherboard. You can see we have one header right there, which is blocked off, which means this only can go in one way, and that's gonna line up on the top right corner right there. So plug that in, and there we go. Unfortunately, most of that won't be seen once we have everything in there, our graphics card and PCI Express cables and stuff. So it's a lot easier to work on like that than trying to get it all on the motherboard. All right, so next up I'm gonna install my all-in-one water cooling loop here in the front of the case. Like I said earlier, I'm not concerned about hot air heating up this case. We've got way more than enough airflow for this, but once this is in the front, I'm then gonna have the fans on this side pushing air through the radiator. Just kind of doing a little test fit here to make sure everything lines up good, and it definitely appears to be. So yeah, I guess all we gotta do is the fans and the rad install. One thing to keep in mind though when you're using AIO coolers, especially when they're mounted to the front, is you don't want the tubes to accidentally push up into the fans that are gonna be exhausting air. So if I install this way, you can see that we get the tubes that push up towards the top. So I would always give the fans a little bit of a spin just to see if they're gonna interfere. Now they're not, so that's the way that I'm gonna go ahead and mount it down, just like that. Because I also don't want them going the opposite direction and making contact with the graphics card. So there we are, plugged into our AIO pump header, and the pump is now installed. Now the last fan we have to plug in is the rear exhaust fan. Fortunately, the Crosshair 6 Hero has a chassis fan header right here on the motherboard nearest to that fan. So all we gotta do is plug this in, and then we can just kind of get this cable sort of up and out of the way. I like to just sort of tuck them between the fan and the little cover right there. There. It's just sort of out of the way, it looks a lot neater, and there you go. Now it's time for everyone's favorite part, the installation of the graphics card. Let's face it, we love our computers, but it's the graphics card that really gets us excited. Now to prepare for the graphics card installation, make sure the little tab on the PCI Express slot you're going to be using is pushed down, and you remove the two I/O covers on the back that line up with the PCI Express slot you're going to be using. Take your graphics card, remove the covers for the display ports, and make sure the cover is taken off right here where the pins are. Go in at a slight angle, and you're going to be inserting these two tabs into the metal slot right there, just like this, and line it up with the socket and push it until you get a click. Now we have to take our two retaining screws that we took off for the covers, tighten those up on the graphics card, and then that bad boy is in place. All we have left to do now is install our power supply and do some cable management. Now this particular case has a bracket on the back that you remove to attach your power supply to. Makes it a lot easier that way, and a little bit more space to be able to push the power supply in. Now we still have all of our cables installed earlier from when we did our test. The only additional power cable we have to plug in, because our fans are getting power through the pump, so we're good there. Our other fans on our chassis are getting power from the motherboard. We just need to power the two hard drives we have, the SSD and the hard drive, and as well as some integrated case lighting that exists in this case, which is one SATA plug right here. So all I did was take one additional modular cable out of the set, which is perfect because we've got 3 SATA plugs there. 2 of them are going right on top of each other, and the third one is in the same region. So that's one of the reasons why I don't separate out hard drives and SSDs if I don't have to, because having one cable installed definitely makes things a lot tighter. We've also got all the built-in cable management right here on the back of this case that's taking care of all of the front panel connectors, so you can see cable management on this is going to look pretty darn good. So what we need to do right now though, is we're going to orient, in this particular case, the fan down. We've got a lot of space right here, we've got some dust filter, so we're not going to be too worried about, so we got a dust filter right there, so we're not too worried about dust in this particular case, even if it was on carpet. Now if your case doesn't have one of these brackets, what I'm doing here, you would just do with the power supply already installed on your case. A lot of cases are actually moving to this type of mechanism now. So there's our bracket nice and installed, but before we go pushing it inside the case, we're going to go ahead and plug in our SATA cable that goes right here where it says SATA. You've got SATA and peripheral on this particular power supply because the peripheral is different for the Molex plugs. So we're just going to plug that into SATA 1, and this is all the power cables we're going to need. Now there's one other cable in here that we haven't installed yet moving forward, and that is our front panel HD audio port. That's what's going to allow you to be able to use the front side headphone jacks on your case. Those are always located on the bottom left of the motherboard. And this is something I, admittedly should have done earlier when the power supply wasn't in there. But I forgot it, and you can see now, do as I say, not as I do, because now you're getting to see firsthand why I like to do this. See, that's the plug we're trying to get into right there. It's dark, it's dreary, it's all by itself. I don't even personally recommend using front side audio if you can avoid it, but you might as well if you have the option. All right, there we go. That's installed, and there was a good example as to why I like to do all that before the graphics card is in there. So what we're going to do now is with the fan orienting down,